to welcome you to our second concurrent session for today. My name is Brad Brazil, and I'll be introducing our speaker, Dr. Deborah Lee. Dr. Lee is professor and coordinator of library instructional services here at the MSU Libraries, and she's also the associate director of the Center for Teaching and Learning here at MSU. She is a member of the 2011 Horizon Report Advisory Board and the 2011 EDUCAUSE Southeast Regional Planning Committee. And she'll be talking to us about the 2011 Horizon Report. And with that, we'll turn it over to Dr. Lee.
Well, good afternoon. Oh, that was just not going to work. Because I know, those brownies that come in that lunch, I know the impact those brownies have. So let's try it again. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. That's much better. My name is Deborah Lee, and I'm going to be talking about the Horizon Report today. And how many of you have read either the 2011 or some version of the Horizon Report? A good number. It's an important document because of how it sort of sets the stage for discussions about emerging technology in higher education. So we're going to be talking about the Horizon Report, what some of the emerging technologies and key trends and challenges are. I was very lucky this past year to actually be invited to be part of the editorial board. And now the young lady that has the camera, I'm going to apologize up front because I move when I talk, and it's just, I talk with my hands and everything else, so it's just kind of hard to stay put. And it's especially hard to stay put when we're talking about emerging technology, right? Because it's so exciting. There's so much going on. And the Horizon Report gives us one way to kind of think about how we're going to engage in that discussion. It's produced as a joint project through the new Media Consortium and the EDUCAUSE Learning Initiative. And it's been around, the project itself started in 2002. They have produced this report annually since 2004, and they are all freely available on the web. So I don't have copies of the report. In fact, they discourage print copies of the report, but if you're on the board, they do give you a couple. And this was what the 2011 would look like. So you can go, you can just Google, or the URLs are actually in the PowerPoint slides, and the slides will be available on our Summit webpage, as well as the video cast of these sessions. What is the point of the Horizon Report? Well, the Horizon Report is designed to facilitate a discussion about emerging technology in higher education and its likely impact on teaching, learning, and creative activity. So the business of universities is really what the Horizon Report focuses on. And it's not really supposed to be a predictive tool. It's not saying these are the things that are going to have an impact. It's always couched in terms of likelihood, because it is done by a bunch of academics after all. These are the key challenges, these are the key trends we see likely having an impact over some time horizon into the future. Each report identifies 3 emerging horizons because the things that are most close to us, those things that are likely to have an impact in 1 year or less, we talk about differently than those things likely to have an impact in 2 to 3 years. And when you get out 4 or 5 years in terms of technology, you're way on the horizon. And so these things look really odd and strange. But what looks really odd and strange in the 4 to 5 year time period 5 years ago are now in the 1 year time period. So these things are moving closer. Each report also identifies 4 key trends and 4 challenges that are likely to be facing people working with emerging technology. All of the work of the board happens on a wiki. And in fact, this is an open conversation. There are certain parts of the process that are closed and open only to the editorial board, but we encourage everybody to participate in this. So you can get onto the wiki, you can interact and discuss issues and challenges and trends that you're seeing happen in your libraries and your institutions. And in fact, the wiki is a broad-based place where you can get and interact with others who are interested in emerging technology and higher education. This past year, they introduced something called the Navigator. And it's a really cool site. I just have a very difficult time trying to describe it in one sentence. Because what happens with the Horizon Report is in the process, they gather hundreds of articles, reports, websites, projects, descriptions, and they bring all that information information together into a knowledge base. And it produces the report. I mean, the report kind of emerges from that. But what do you do with this knowledge base? And the Navigator is an attempt to put that knowledge base out there for other people to explore and to use and to contribute to. So if you're interested in the issue of ebooks, for example, you can go to the Navigator, you can pull up the section on ebooks, and you'll find articles about that topic. You'll find projects at different institutions about that project. You can put your projects on the Navigator. And so who knows, maybe something that's going on in your library or your institution could show up in a future Horizon report because you've actually put it out to a very large audience to view and to discover. Here. Now, the Horizon report in its original incantation was for higher education. But other people sort of stood up and said, well, these things are really salient to my user group, but there are some differences. And so we saw some variations of the report start to emerge. There's an Australia, New Zealand edition, there's a Business and Economic Development edition, there's an Ibero-American edition. The one I'm most familiar with, other than the higher education one, is the K through 12 edition, and there's also one for museums. So they are related, but they each have their own advisory board, they each go through this process independently, though they pull from that same knowledge base. Now, I said that there were 4 key trends that this year's report identified. The first has to do with the abundance of resources and relationships through the web and how that is changing our role. This refers to the idea that people come to us in higher education with questions about how to do things. Okay? If they discover Google Plus out there on the web, they're going to come in, that comes in to higher education. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind when reading the Horizon report is it's not a library document. It's written between EDUCAUSE and the New Media Consortium, and it's really targeting that broader higher education community. But if you read the report, these are the issues in many cases that we're dealing with in libraries. The applicability of the report in libraries is very, very strong. And if you think about this, what's the likelihood we're going to get a Google Plus question at the reference desk? What's the likelihood that some student through Facebook is going to approach us with a question because they know that we're librarians and librarians have answers? So the first key trend is just noticing that role of credentialing, that role of authority in higher education in regards to these challenging changes in trends. And you'll notice I modified my slides. I tried to get them big enough so that people could see. The second key trend is another one that we're very familiar with. People expect to be able to work, learn, and study, I would add play, whenever and wherever they want. They don't want to be bounded by a room. They don't want to be bounded by an institution. They don't want to be bounded by a locale. That has real implications for higher education. It has implications for libraries. If students do their best work at 2 o'clock in the morning and we close at 2 o'clock in the morning, and now I'm not volunteering to work the desk, okay, at that time, but how are they going to have, if we want to be part of that learning process, if we want to be there and engaged with them, we have to think about how are we going to engage students 24/7 wherever they are located. They also want to be able to access their information in that same kind of environment, and that creates real challenges for security, for authentication. The third key trend has to do with the ever-changing nature of work. And you know, higher education and work are not independent concepts. They are related with each other. And we've certainly seen this, right? That there seems to be more students working in teams, that the concept of collaborative environments and collaborative education is one that's really taken hold in higher education, and it's because it's taken hold in the workplace. That has a tremendous impact in the library in ways that you may not think about. Certainly we still have those students who come in and they want to nestle down, they want to hunker down in their own little niche, and they don't want to move from that. But how many of your students are coming in now and they want to work in teams or they have to work in teams? That means they need a space that they can work in teams. It may mean something like that at one place that was in here earlier before lunch. I love that setup they had there, where you have highly interactive and mobile furniture. And have you noticed that students will make things mobile even when it's not, right? And that's because they're making the environment conform to their needs. But it may be something simple. One of the simple things we found in our library is that we need to check out extension cords. Because students are working in groups now, and everybody wants to plug in a mobile app or a laptop. And we run out of plugs for them to do that. And so we just need to check out extension cords, so when they're working in groups, they can work as a group. So it's facilitating that ability to work as a group. The final trend is that the technologies we use are increasingly cloud-based. And Thomas has got a cloud-based workshop. And in fact, I would argue that many of the themes you see throughout the Horizon Report resonate throughout our summit because they are issues that we're dealing with as libraries. But so much of cloud-based computing does raise enormous opportunities, but there are some real challenges in terms of supporting that environment. IT folks sometimes have some concerns about that environment and the security issues that surround that. Like with all emerging technologies, there are some challenges that come with this as well. One has to do with digital media literacy, and you've seen this referred to a couple of times already this morning. And digital media literacy continues to rise in its importance as a key skill in every discipline and profession. Now, this is a concept from information literacy that we are familiar with. I'm an instruction librarian at heart, and that's what I do, and information literacy is a key concept there. But digital media literacy takes that really one step higher. So, for example, we teach Photoshop in the library. That's well and good, but there are all kinds of ethical considerations, especially in the sciences now, with using multimedia applications with scientific results. It's a really hot issue in the sciences of actually manipulating, data manipulation, because you can do some very fancy data manipulation with Photoshop of your results, and the impact that has on scientific inquiry. So raising ethical issues, raising acceptable standards, and making sure our students have those skills they need to succeed in a digital age becomes ever more important. Evaluation's tough, right? At every level in emerging technologies, evaluation becomes a real challenge for us. But one of the challenges in higher education has to do with evaluating new scholarly forms of creativity. We're not only working with a new generation of students, we're working with a new generation of scholars. And they're coming in with all kinds of products that just doesn't fit into our traditional mold. And my untenured faculty are smiling at me in the audience here. But they just don't fit into that old mold of, if you're in the humanities, you publish a book. If you're in the sciences or social sciences, you publish your journal articles before you come up for tenure. Well, what if you create something that isn't a book, that isn't a journal article, but is part of that scholarly stream, that new contribution to scholarship? How do we evaluate that? And it is a challenge in higher education right now. For us in libraries, it's also a challenge of how do we collect that? How do we bring that into the information stream and make sure that it's part of the day-to-day instruction we provide, the reference services that we provide, that consultation services we provide to users, that we're not solely focusing on those traditional methods of scholarship, that we're encompassing all of the types of scholarship out there. Economic pressures and new models of education are presenting unprecedented competition to the traditional model of the university. This is DeVry, this is Phoenix. These are the for-profit institutions, and they are hitting hard in commercials lately. I don't know if you've been watching these commercials, but they've got the young lady who's sitting in her pajamas, and she's like, I'm going to college, and she's raising her kids at the same time. You've got another very successful executive who's saying, I didn't have time to stop and go get my graduate degree. I got it at such and such university. Now, so there's a real challenge to universities to reach out to both traditional and non-traditional students that we have not seen as our core user group. That also has implications for how we reach out in the library. The same challenges that our institutions are facing, we face in engaging those students. And if we do build a strong distance education population, as hard as it can be to connect with the freshman composition student who's on campus and wondering why the teacher drugged them into the library for that first library instruction session, it's even harder to connect to that student that's 5 states away and maybe in a different time zone and only works on their classes from 10 o'clock on at night. That creates some real challenges for us. How do we meet these new educational environments? And this last challenge is one that I know we can get an amen on in here, because it's how do you keep pace with constantly changing applications and tools and devices. You get a device and the next edition comes out. There's an iPad 2 after you bought the iPad. There's the, what's the HP version? I'm an Apple person, so I tune everything else out. The Zoom, yes. Oh, with Thor on it. Yeah, it's on the commercials. Keeping track. You know, you get up in the morning and there's Google Plus, and there's My Citations and Google Scholar, and there's all kinds of new services, and they spawn like little rabbits just kind of coming out there. Some of them are going to have legs and they're going to be around. Some of them are going to be here 6 months and they'll lose their venture capital and you'll never see them again. Keeping up with those challenges can be a real challenge, keeping up with these changes, but it's a worthwhile change to have because this is, again, how we're engaging our students. Now, in addition to the challenges and the trends, there are 6 emerging technologies that are identified each year as part of the Horizon report. And there's 2 that are identified as likely to have an impact on higher education in the near term. The first one, we're going to chuckle at, because we've been talking about this for the last 2 days, and that's going to be electronic books. Everybody's talking about electronic books. There are some people doing stuff about it, but there's a lot more talk in higher education probably than there is actually action with that. And part of that is that there's a real dichotomy between the consumer market and ebooks and the academic market and ebooks. And I would argue that the consumer market is way out here, and I'm with them. You know, I've got my Kindle, I've got my iPad. If I have a choice, unless it's a cookbook, I buy an ebook. You know, I don't really want to take the iPad into the kitchen and fry next to it. But everything else, I really like an ebook. But in academic markets, that has been a tougher nut to crack for a variety of reasons, because there's some real challenges to using ebooks in our market. Now, when they are talking about ebooks, a lot of times what they are talking about are not the package deals that we buy in libraries, but the book you use in the classroom, the textbook market. And that has been a really difficult market to try and figure out. If you took an individual textbook right now and looked it up to see how many versions of that textbook exist in print and electronic in various formats, it's not unusual to see 12 to 15. Because you can get the print version, you can get the partial print version, you can get the print plus electronic version, you can get the electronic version in probably 4 different formats. You can get the a la carte electronic version where you as the instructor pick the chapters you're going to put in the book. That book is not resellable, by the way, so there's real implications to that book. So there's just a lot of real challenges of how we're going to use textbooks in the future in higher education. Everybody feels like you should be able to do it, right? You remember lugging around your calculus book? You remember the size of your chemistry book? I mean, those things broke backs. They were so heavy. Think of putting all of that on your iPad and carrying your iPad to class. And in fact, in many ways, the iPad was a game changer for textbooks. It really gave impetus to people saying, maybe we finally have the device that can make electronic textbooks in the classroom a reality. But there are still some real impediments to that. One of the big companies that are trying to solve some of these issues is a company called Inkling. Inkling has secured private venture capital funds. They have gone into major cooperative arrangements with companies like McGraw-Hill, and they are designing what they term the next generation of textbooks. So it's not just taking a textbook and digitizing the content and putting it on the web, but trying to re-envision what does an electronic textbook look like as opposed to its print counterpart. So it is a slow process. They've been very slow to get titles on there. You can get onto the Inkling website and you can kind of browse around and see what they have. One of the things about Inkling is they made a commitment to iPads. They are not working with any other device. Their content is solely viewable on iPads. That has all kinds of pedagogical considerations. For me as an instructor, I teach at Mississippi State as well as being a librarian. I can't walk into my class of 45 students and assume every student has an iPad. So that means I can't assign a textbook that's only viewable on an iPad. So that there are some real pedagogical issues until institutions make a wholesale commitment to a particular device. But Inkling is an interesting company to watch to see what we're doing with electronic textbooks. And they have a nice little video that you can get on and kind of play with it. If you have an iPad, you can download the Inkling app for free, and most of the textbooks have a free chapter that you can download. They will also sell you individual chapters as opposed to the entire textbook. But I don't buy these things. But I do free, I will download in a heartbeat. And it is kind of useful to get and look at and see how they're envisioning some of these textbooks. Ball State has been an interesting institution to watch because they have committed significant funds to developing an emerging media initiative where they essentially try out some of these different technologies in the classroom. And some of them are successes and some of them are failures. This is a screenshot from their project where they use Kindles in the courses, and they try to use the Kindle as a medium for delivering electronic textbooks. I have yet to see a really successful Kindle project. Okay, the general public loves Kindles. I love my Kindle. But as a textbook mechanism, it has some real hang-ups and issues related to it. Accessibility has been a big issue with it, but it's just also, it's kind of clunky to move around in. It's clunky to put a note on there. They have brought out apps for Kindles now, but you still have the level of apps that you have in something like an iPad. So Kindles are not probably going to be the answer to that issue. A different answer that the National Academies of Press has taken is to make their content open access. If you have not gotten on the National Academies of Press website, I encourage you to do so. This is the publishing arm of the National Academies of Science, and they made a commitment to providing open access content to their publications. So they will gladly sell you the book. Now, I've got a book here on nursing, but they'll gladly sell you for $44.95, but you can download it for free as a PDF. What you cannot do is put the PDF in your catalog. You can put the link in your catalog. I used one of these books in the class I taught last year. I couldn't put the PDF in the course management system. That would violate the contract, the licensing on that particular resource. What I could do is put the instructions for students to register themselves and download the PDF free of charge. And students will love you when you give them free books that they can use in their classes, especially in biochemistry. They just think you're walking on water at that point. But this is a wonderful resource, and in some ways, if you think about it, we pay for this content. This is the National Academies of Sciences, where this is taxpayer money that's going into some of the research that's being done here. So it is a wonderful open access initiative that's brought thousands of texts out into free access for the public. Related to this is going to be the mobile movement, mobile applications movement. And you can see where the e-books and mobiles kind of go together, but it's not just an e-book phenomenon. It goes back to that trend where we saw that people want to be able to access, to play, to work, to study, wherever they're located. Well, they don't do that with a legal pad. Okay? They do that with a mobile application of some type. There are a range of devices that are being used here, everything from an iPhone to tablet types, to netbooks, to PCs, anything that's giving people mobile access to information and functionality. There is some network issues. Again, it's one thing for me to teach a class and to wax on about my iPad, which I'm a big fan of, But it's another for me to teach a class of, say, 70 students and expect all of them to have an iPad and then to be able to get on the wireless node simultaneously without any degradation of service. And you have some classes at Mississippi State taught 400 students. So if you've got 400 students suddenly accessing everything at the same time, that starts to be a real security issue. It starts to be a real network operations issue. This is why these are not small conversations that we have. These have to be big institution-wide conversations to talk about how we implement some of these issues. But there have been some really interesting projects that have been undertaken through the last few years with mobile technology in higher education. Purdue University has done some really innovative things. One is called Hot Seat. Now, all of us have, I won't say all of us, but a good number of us were tweeting earlier today. And there have been some, and there was a good presentation here last year about somebody who used Twitter as a librarian, as an embedded librarian in a class. Hot Seat is an effort to provide sort of academic Twitter to the Purdue University, and that facilitates those conversations at 140 characters or less between students and faculty. You have other types of applications that have been developed. One is called Cupids, and Cupids is something that was developed as a special event that commemorated, I think it was Newfoundland, English Canada's first settlement. And so it brings a whole experience in at the touch of your mobile device, in this case your iPhone. And you're seeing more and more of this. The Civil War, sesquicentennial, I hope I got that out right, is spawning quite a few of these. There are a number of applications that are coming out on an iPad or iPhone and iTunes and in other formats that support the study and the celebration of a particular event like that. One that got a lot of airplay was the British Library, when they brought out their 19th century collection. Now, this was a very interesting event that they did. They brought out an app that is designed to give you access to their 19th century collections from an iPhone or from an iPad. This is available through iTunes. 100 titles are available free of charge. After that, there's a subscription if you want access to the full collection. And you are starting to see the commercialization of some information available through some of these mobile devices. For example, PubMed has PubMed Lite that lets you get in and search PubMed from your iPhone or your iPad. But the full version of PubMed, which is what you're really going to want if you're a researcher, is $2.99. And $2.99 is not a lot of money, but it's paying for something that's a government application. So it's kind of an interesting trend that we're starting to see for commercialization. This is an even more interesting trend. Elsevier, and how many of you are customers? Science Direct, Scopus? Okay, there are a few people who are. This will apply to you, but it's an interesting trend to watch. You know, Elsevier has Science Direct and they have Scopus. What they have started doing is developing applications that draw upon one or more of their databases or data sources, and those applications are free. There's 33 applications now that you can pull up. Some are kind of silly, some are kind of helpful. I mean, there's one that works with Mendeley, which is a citation service that actually overlays and lets you see the most often pulled articles out of Science Direct. People have put their Mendeley accounts. They have a competition. So if you have a great idea, you can actually put your idea forward. You don't have to be able to program it. You just have to have an idea for an application that Elsevier can use. Now, there is two ways to look at that. One is that Elsevier is opening up and asking for input from its user base on what they want, what would help you use their data. The other is that they are getting their research and development free of charge, and they're asking you to provide their R&D. But either way, it is kind of a cool idea. You don't have to be able to do the programming. You just have to come up with the idea. And I'm not quite sure what winner of the idea gets. Fame and fortune, I doubt. But you can still submit, I think, through September 1st. You can submit your ideas through there. And then there's mobile websites for libraries, and you know, Someone mentioned ours earlier, and I have a screenshot of our mobile site. This is the second iteration of our mobile site. And it is something that we do know some of our users are using because they come up to the reference desk and they'll have the iPhone or they'll have their smartphone and they say, see, I found this, I found this on the web, I can't find this book, where's it located? So we know that they're using that and that they are pulling this information in and tapping it. And again, it's another way to engage our users wherever they may be located. And then other institutions have taken that institution-wide. So UNC is one of the institutions that has a mobile app for the entire campus where they funnel not just emergency notifications, but you can actually, through this app, find out if there's a seat open in a computer lab in a room halfway across campus. You can check on where the bus is for a particular place. You can check on a whole host of information about athletics. So it is a way for institutions to try and interact with folks at the mobile level. And even in the high school level, we're seeing more high schools pull this in. I find this highly interesting since I know a lot of high schools ban smartphones. But this one is actually focusing on the athletics program and giving all kinds of information to both the students and to the parents about athletic schedules and the games and practice information. So you're seeing a large number of institutions use this. The key here is that students are using their apps at a very early age. They're learning to use this information. It always cracks me up when I see somebody hand their iPad to their 4-year-old, and the 4-year-old starts, and they instinctively do very well on that touch screen. They're being trained from a very early age to expect an interactivity, at this level. Now, the further out we go, the weirder the world looks. Okay, so I'm going to go a little faster through these. Augmented reality a lot of times deals with the concept of layering and pulling layers in and allowing users to observe two different realities at the same time. So you see this a lot in museum applications especially. Or if you think about you're walking through a museum, maybe you've got a particular exhibit up, and then you've got an application that allows users to kind of sink into the time period they're viewing, maybe to hear the music, to experience different aspects of that particular exhibit. This is one that takes you around Sydney and allows you to walk around modern-day Sydney and uses GIS locators in your phone and throughout the city to kind of connect with a historical program that lets you then look at a modern building and view what it looked like 200 years ago and experience the city as it used to be and as it is at the same time. They do the same thing, and this is where gaming kind of comes in. There are a lot of children's games or children's applications now in the K-12 system that allow children to experience that same kind of thing. This is pulling from what I think it's in Virginia, where they actually can walk around a physical location and study native populations that used to live in that area. There are some Indian mounds buried underneath the city. And so they actually can pull up, and it makes a little, almost a scavenger hunt kind of thing as they move around and learn about the people who used to live in that locale. And that takes us to game-based learning, which is related to augmented reality. Now, I grew up with Atari. Okay, I grew up with Pong. I am of the Pong generation. We've come a long way since Pong. And augmented games are very different in scope. I mean, gaming technology has really, really changed. So much so that it's hard to just generically describe it. But it's based on some pretty sound educational theory, and it goes back to the concept of experiential learning, that instead of me lecturing to you, we'd have a game where you could kind of figure out some of these things, and maybe you would work as teams to work in this information. Many universities, this is from the University of Wisconsin, have really put some resources into trying to encourage their faculty to come up with gaming applications that reinforce those different ways of learning, those different levels of intelligence that we find in students. So this is one that you wouldn't think of cryogenics as being a topic really popular for gamers. But this is one attempt to try and take a topic and build a game around it that teaches core principles of the discipline. And they've got a number of different projects that they have hosted through the years at Wisconsin. Who would you think is one of the biggest proponents of gaming theory and gaming applications? The military. The Department of Defense has been investing in this for over 30 years. Over 25 years ago, when I was in graduate school of political science, they hired graduate students to help design insurgency games. I won't say anything more about that, but I know people who helped design some of those early games. And they have come a long way with this type of gaming technology. If you think about it, it allows you to simulate different types of environment to cover thousands of variables that can be at play in any given situation without having to have some of the repercussions of actually doing modified demos. Now, somebody mentioned something about Connect earlier in an earlier presentation, and this takes us to those applications, those trends that were spotted or highlighted as being most likely to have an impact of 4 to 5 years. I can tell you that this one was on the cusp between being in the furthest group and being further in. And I kind of think 4 to 5 years is overstating how long it's going to take for this particular trend to have an impact in higher education. To some extent, it already has. Gesture-based computing has been, R&D in this area has been around for a long time, but it has, it really hit the consumer market with the Wii. And you know, who doesn't like playing Wii bowling? I mean, really. But there are all kinds of other applications that you can use with gesture-based computing. There's a wonderful series of little flyers that EDUCAUSE puts out called 7 Things You Need to Know About. And they have one on gesture-based, or just the Wii. I think they have 7 things you need to know just about the Wii. And they've got different projects where people have taken the Wii concept and even some of the hardware and redesigned it to work in higher education. So for example, a music professor takes the Wii and designs conducting applications for it, for its students. The Connect also has a lot of applications that it brought in with it. But some of the most exciting stuff is happening with haptic systems. Haptic systems would give you the sense of touch in some of your applications. So one of the key selling points of that iPad when it first came out is the gyroscope, so that it has an awareness of the orientation that you hold it at. That opened up all kinds of gaming applications for it. But there's no real sense of touch there. So if I touch water, I'm still touching the top of the iPad. What if I touched water and I felt water when I was on an application? What if in medical sciences, and there's some wonderful medical apps that are out there that allow students to see 3-dimensional viewings of bodies, of body parts. I'm an economist by training, so all I can say is body parts. But what if they had the sensation of touch of flesh? What if you could simulate what it's actually like to do an autopsy or a surgery, and you could actually provide it, because there's no simulation right now that gives you all of those senses, that appeals to all of your senses. That's where the research is taking us. And that sounds a little Star Trek-y like, but it's out there, and that is coming. And this is one called MudPad. MudPad is just exactly that. It's trying to give you the sense of being able to touch fluid, building fluid dynamics into some of these applications. There's another one called iDraw that uses the motions, minute motions sensed from the eye to actually interact with the computer and to draw with your eyes as opposed to using your hands. And then learning analytics is probably the one that is least developed of all the 6 trends that we looked at. Learning analytics is the idea of taking data mining, all of this data we collect in higher education, and being able to change an outcome based on that data. A lot of it is being used with at-risk students, trying to collect enough data that we can identify students who are at risk in that freshman year, in that sophomore year, and being able to develop intervention programs and an educational experience that actually helps them to succeed. So it's moving away from that one-size-fits-all concept of education and building in support systems. A lot of it deals with grades, And this is one that early on that came out from Northern Arizona University that looked at grading systems and tried to predict based on a series of especially freshman level courses and early performance in those courses, what to do about students who might be at risk. Again, Purdue has a more sophisticated program called Signals, where they try to pull a large amount of data to identify students who are at risk of dropping out their first year. And it requires a great deal of institutional commitment. I mean, somebody's got to submit all that data. Faculty have to take attendance. They have to turn in midterm grades. They have to help provide that information. But it's an attempt to data mine that information and provide it, and then actually do something with it in a meaningful way. Okay, so you're all going to go back and design a haptic system in your library, right? Yes? How do you use the Horizon Report? Well, let me tell you a story. I'm big on stories in library instruction. I started work at Millsaps College about 20 years ago. And it was a small liberal arts college in Jackson, Mississippi. And I was very fortunate to be there when they first got the internet. I was at Millsaps when they turned the internet on. And I was part of a team of volunteers from across the university who came together and who learned about what we were doing and then committed to teach others and our colleagues, not the students, but our colleagues, about how to use it. Remember Telnet? Remember FTP? Some of you are not old enough to remember these things, but some of you definitely do. And I went back to the library and I reported back to my colleagues and they were so excited. Oh, it's so cool, you can tell that to libraries around the world. And we had this older librarian who was a very sweet lady, but she did not like computers, not at all. And I remember after my report, she looked at me and said, well, maybe if we just ignore it, it will go away. It didn't go away, and it's not going to go away. So we can try and ignore things that sound like it was beamed down from Star Trek, but in a few years, they're going to be sitting on our shelf. They're going to be circulating through our desks. I still want to get a helicopter. I mean, we got to have a helicopter. But there are all kinds of things that look far-fetched that become very real very fast. Telnet was here and then gone. FTP, we moved on to Mosaic, and I thought Mosaic was here for a long time, and then Mosaic was gone, and that was a web browser. And an ability to interact with the web in a different way. We live in a constant state of change, and that brings some challenges with it, but it brings a tremendous amount of opportunity for us to engage with our users and apply really decades, age-old principles of librarianship, because those principles don't change. The packaging that we wrap them in changes, but the principles of what we're trying to do with our students hasn't changed. And so it's an opportunity to really meld the old with the new and to grow. And what more could you ask from a career than that? So that's what you can do with the Horizon Report. It's also a great tool to use to open up dialogues with other units on your campus, because we can't be silos. You have to actually interact with the other institutions and organizations on your campus, with your IT folks, who are still kind of squirrely about Facebook, if you've noticed. They are just not quite sure about the security breaches that Facebook offers, with the Learning Center, with the Teaching Center, with faculty development, with all of those units across campus that have the same vested interest you do in engaging and succeeding with your students. Questions? Questions? Yes?
The learning analytics, how many years out was that one?
That's 5 or more.
5 or
The
more.
question was, how far out is learning analytics? That's one of those trends that started out that is really perceived to be out in the distance, because 5 years is a long time out there. Mobile computing used to be 5 years out. In an earlier report, that's where it started. And it has come forward as the technology has developed pretty fast. Maybe not for 5 years, but pretty fast. Other questions? Or comments about how you're using some of these things in your life, some of the challenges you see in your libraries? Yes?
I think as librarians, we don't see ourselves as being part of the learning analytics, but we really are, because anything that affects the student and student retention affects us as well, because we have to see ourselves as the big picture, we have to see ourselves as being part of the big picture too.
Right, I agree entirely. I do not think of libraries as support services. I think we are part of the
We
educational
are.
mission of the university. And I think of myself as an educator, not as a support staff, I'm an educator as much as the person standing in front of a classroom is. And we have to, people aren't always going to give us that role. And we have to
fight for that.
We have to go out and assertively claim that role. And to do that, we need to bring something to the table. A lot of times, we're on the cutting edge of some of these technologies. The librarians, at lunch, the speaker mentioned about how many librarians you can find through Twitter Grader. Librarians took to Twitter like crazy. Librarians are one of the most active communities on Google Plus right now. Librarians love new technology, and we're out there figuring out how to use it. And we can take and parlay that into a conversation with our campus. We're offering a Google Plus workshop through the Instructional Media Center this fall, before most of our faculty will have ever heard of it. We offer iPad workshops, we offer cloud computing workshops. So it's a way for us to really be on the front edge of some of these trends. Yes?
I think learning analytics will be particularly useful in some ways for user instruction, because how does that correlate to what goes on in the classroom, and do they really gain something from those experiences?
Assessment of instruction is something we're really grappling with right now. How do you know you made a difference just because you gave a library instruction session? And that is, you can ask them, but I don't think their opinion of a session is really assessment. It's something we're going to have to do for SACs. But it's not, I don't think that itself is the level of assessment we're looking for. So we are still exploring those issues. Yes. Yeah,
Has someone developed a list of the things to measure about freshmen to determine their success, further success in college? Are those already identified?
There are studies that have looked at the determinants of success, and a lot of universities, and I don't know if Mississippi State has this or not because they keep it hidden in student affairs if they have it. I know UNC had this. UNC had a program back when I was a student. University of North Carolina had a program that would predict what your likely GPA was as a freshman based on the school you graduated from different demographics. I only know this because a friend of mine accidentally saw hers and was highly insulted. she got access. It's not information they gave the student, but they actually did a predictive model based on what your likelihood of lasting through the year was and what the likely GPA would be at the end of the year. So there are certainly analytics out there. You have to be careful. I mean, think of how much damage you can do to somebody's self-esteem with something like that. So yeah, but there are models out there. Questions? Yes?
Well, not really a question, but that reminded me, there's the EDUCAUSE study of undergraduate students that I found particularly informative and useful about undergraduate students and their ownership and adoption of technology and what they do with it.
Yes. Yes. The EDUCAUSE study, and there have been a couple of other OCLC studies. They've done the Pew Internet Life study has come out with some studies that are also providing some valuable insight into how users of different ages interact with us. Questions? Comments? See, I was worried about that one.
I just wanted to, I really hope that I could get a hot tip on the time frame with the gesture-based control. I don't know, I suspect I may not be the only one that had a run-in with the two-finger pinch scroll kind of magic that you have to do on the iPad. Kind of with all over there, so
Yeah.
it's a brave new world.
It is a brave new world, and really, it was only by a couple of votes that gesture-based computing fell into the category that it did. It almost made a higher category there. So I think people see that as an area where we're going to see a lot of applications. I think you brought out some really interesting applications. And some of what comes out first looks like play. And you have to, I think as a university, we have to have an environment that encourages play. Because from play comes some very serious research and work. In the long term, it just doesn't always look that way when you see it. and it's sort of like sausage or budget thinking, evidently. It can look very messy at first, and then hopefully it comes out and looks like something a little more serious down the road. Questions? Thank you for coming. I hope you will look up the Horizon Report and think about how you can have a dialogue with your peers or with other constituents on your campus about some of those trends they talked about.